The Arizona Cardinals should 100% inquire about trading for Myles Garrett. Let's discuss.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Alex Clancy here. Follow me on Twitter, Clancy's Corner. Follow the podcast at Locked On AZ Cards. Thank you for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen. Free wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please go to the YouTube channel. Search Locked On Arizona Cardinals. Hit that subscribe button. Turn notifications on. Leave a like on the video. You know the drill at this point every day. Today's episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. JM show today. New mock draft Monday. Matt Miller, ESPN. He's had a meteoric rise in the draft space over the last 5 or 7 years. And he did his first mock draft, I believe, first 2-rounder. And it's a very, very interesting approach to the Arizona Cardinals roster, and I'm intrigued. Cardinals have a new O-line coach, Justin Frye, former Ohio State coach. What does it mean? I'm going to kind of pay homage to something that I discussed last week, and it rings true when you watch Arizona Cardinals coaches get elevated jobs elsewhere. I'll explain what I mean. First, this morning, for those that missed it, Myles Garrett officially requested a trade. Wrote a heartfelt note to the Cleveland Browns organization and their fans, but he's like, I want out, I want to win. So there's a couple things. One, let's just pull the rug out from underneath. The Cardinals aren't in the best position to win a Super Bowl next year amid all the other teams who could afford Myles Garrett's services. Okay, I know that. And also, the Cardinals defense, from what we saw last season, is 1 or 2 players up front away from really being a top 5 defense. And I truly believe that. They're close. They're very close. And we'll see what happens with Kazir White. We'll see what happens when Darius Robinson comes back and when B.J. Ojulari comes back after being on the shelf for an ACL tear last year. Bilal Nichols, Justin Jones, everybody was injured up front. But the Cardinals should 100% look him up and see what it would cost. For those that wonder how much he's going to make over the next 2 years of his contract, on the 5th league day of 2025, so that's mid-March, he's due $18.5 million. On the 5th league day of 2026, he's due $23.7 million. So it's just over $40 million for 2 years. So this is kind of a J.J. Watt deal. Couple positives. The Cardinals can afford it. Okay? The Cardinals can afford this. It's not $35 million a year for a wide receiver or something like that. This is definitely within the confines of something the Cardinals can afford. He is a plug-and-play, ready to rock, all-pro. Very rarely do all-pros go on the trade market, on the trade block, where other teams can trade for him. All he's done since being in Cleveland, aside from the Mason Rudolph incident, obviously, 3, 4, 5 years ago, the dude has just kept his mouth shut and balled out. John Watson stuff, outside noise, winning, losing, whatever. He's shown up every day, and he's absolutely demolished opposing offensive linemen. From the outside, from the inside, doesn't really matter. And that's something the Cardinals desperately need. So with the amount of money they have, it's still over $70 million to spend. With the bevy of draft picks that they have, and with this draft being a lower tier draft, comparatively speaking, to recent years past, it adds up into this cauldron elixir of, they can 100% trade for him and 100% be warranted. They'd be immediately better, obviously, and it wouldn't burn the future bridge for them to continue to grow as an organization, as a roster, and as a team. So what it comes down to, naturally, is, does Monty Osfort want to pony up? Does Monty Osfort want to kind of remove some of the future assets to get a proven entity who's been all world for the last decade? Does he want to do that? And that's the interesting part. We'll discuss this, throughout the offseason. Monty Austinfort's thought process on the future. While I understand that rebuilding an organization from the studs is a near impossible task in 2 years, with really no redeeming, assets aside from, James Conner, Budda Baker, Kyler Murray, Trey McBride. It's like he's done it. Okay, so that's done. The rebuild is complete. Now, the leveling up is what is that's the next step. So it's a choose your own adventure on how he wants to do it. I don't know if Myles Garrett would garner a first round pick at this point. Could you give up 2 2s for Myles Garrett? I would do that, because here's the thing. This is something that gets lost in the fray a lot during these conversations. People are looking at what they give up and far less at what the Cardinals would be getting back. It's like, yes, you give up a few picks and you get Myles Garrett. It's not like you give them a few picks and you know who those picks are going to be, and you know those picks are going to be Pro Bowlers, and you know those picks are going to be with the Cardinals for 10 years. You're like, no, I'm good. You have no idea what those picks are going to be. Draft picks in the NFL specifically are one of the most overvalued entities in professional sports. You have no idea what that's going to be. You do know who you're trading for. You do know the stats and the numbers and the receipts for who you'd be trading for. And that's wildly more important than, maybe this second round pick turns out to be a Pro Bowler. Maybe. Doesn't make any sense. But that's how people think. And that's why you come here, so I can, rationalize things for you in any way I see fit, or any way I deem to be rational, which may or may not be rational in and of itself. Plus, listen, it'd be fun. It'd be fun seeing 95 in Arizona Cardinals red worn by Myles Garrett. The only reason why I think that there's a chance that the Cardinals would do this. Number one, they play in the NFC. So that, negates the 15 other teams in the AFC to where the Browns would have to see them, especially they wouldn't trade them in division, but so not in the AFC. That's one of the big things, that big moving parts usually, especially where traded, you move them outside of the conference. That's one. Number two, they got the space. Number three, I believe, and, I got some pushback here, which is great. And that's what this conversation's for. Got some pushback on Jonathan Gannon, Drew Petzing, and Nick Rallis' job with Monty Austinfort at the helm as coaches since they've come over. And I'll talk about in the next segment how their line coach already got an OC job like that. When was a lot, really? Aside from Todd, was Todd Bowles the last guy to get a big-time job after he left the Cardinals because of his production on the Cardinals? I mean, Ray Orton, that was before Todd Bowles. I'm sure I'm missing somebody. James Betcher got, I think it was, what was the Giants DC job? I mean, come on, guys. The fact that they've made an impact like this right away cannot be overlooked. And that's something where they have a chance where it's like, if you asked Myles Garrett if he could be plug and play in this defense with that secondary, giddy up. Giddy up. I think it'd be a great fit. Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. But we'll discuss this a lot more in depth about Monty Austinfort's options and choices, and really the choose your own adventure of now what? You've done stage one. Now stage two can be whatever you want it to be, because you set yourself up in the last 720 days or so with all of the ammo necessary to do whatever the hell you want with this organization. Be fascinating. Cardinals have a new offensive lineman, an offensive line coach. Why is it more about where he came from than who he is? Discuss it next. Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by our friends over at Bink LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. I've got a personal touch with LinkedIn throughout my, business career, but You, as a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5, and your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. So it's called Post Your Job. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write descriptions and then quickly gets you your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires, man. That's a pretty high percentage. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So I know that the chance of Myles Garrett being an Arizona Cardinal next season is slim. I know that. And I also know that the Cardinals have never been in a better position to acquire a top-tier talent with the money that he makes, with the infrastructure around it, not just with money to spend, not just with draft capital, but also with young players on rookie-scale contracts in important positions, namely Garrett Williams, Max Melton, Dadrian Taylor-Demerson, Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey Benson, Paris Johnson Jr., like Darius Robinson. Did I just say Darius Robinson? I might have. And B.J. Ojulari, like if 80% of those guys work out, the Cardinals are going to be good with salary cap for at least 2 more years. So this is a perfect time to strike, especially with the uncertainty of the NFC West, especially with this being the year where they have all of the abilities, all of the tools in their tool sheds unlocked to be able to acquire talent, whether it be through free agency, trade, draft, whatever it is. Now it's time for Monty Osborne to figure out the best mix to set this team up for perpetual relevancy, which is something they've desperately needed over the last handful of years. The Cardinals have a new offensive line coach, Justin Frye, formerly of Ohio State, coached John Gaines at UCLA before that 3 years ago, and was Paris Johnson Jr.'s coach in 2022 before he got drafted. This is the bigger picture here. And I feel like while it's not an exact science, drafting, free agency, how players are going to transition from, the college ranks to the pros, we're not seeing a whole lot of Fordhams and Temples for people being drafted. We're not seeing coaches come over from small schools, small teams. What the Cardinals did was they signed the defensive coordinator for a team that made the Super Bowl. They signed a defensive coordinator who was a linebackers coach for the team that made the Super Bowl and one of the better defenses in the NFL. And they brought over Drew Petzing, who was a quarterback's coach, and run game coordinator, I believe, for the guy who had one of the best run games and one of the best run schemes in Cleveland with Kevin Stefanski and Nick Chubb. That's what they did. Jeff Rodgers, all-world special teams guy. The Cardinals lose their offensive line coach, Clayton Adams, who got hired as the offensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys. And they bring over Justin Frye from Ohio State. Paris Johnson Jr., Ohio State. Marvin Harrison Jr., Ohio State. Big 5 conferences. Big schools. Big schools. Big schools. Trey Benson, Florida State. Max Melton, Rutgers, Big 10. Like, this isn't the Steve Keim Cardinals where it's like, I'm going to be the smartest person in the room, Andy Isabella, UMass. The next, Victor Cruz. It's a bigger picture thing. And sure, bringing any coach from the college ranks to the pros, there's going to be some transition. And I would be shocked if the Cardinals don't draft an offensive lineman in the first 2 rounds, in my opinion, unless they, want to go the free agent route, which I would vehemently push against for, I discussed it last week. Like, money dumped into free agent offensive linemen usually is way more expensive, way higher than the actual production. But we'll see. And when you look at a guy with a pedigree of, UCLA, Ohio State, the obvious transition would be to the pros. And the Cardinals found a guy who knows Paris Johnson Jr. better than any coach in college football to continue to mold him as the franchise left tackle. He didn't take a step back last year. Paris Johnson Jr. played very well last year. Okay. Give him some sacks, had a couple penalties. It's going to happen. Playing left tackle is difficult, especially in the NFC West. But when they solidify the interior of the offensive line, especially left guard. Now, Evan Brown played fine last year. Okay. Wasn't a world beater. He played fine. If the Cardinals can bring in a guy to play left guard that allows Paris Johnson Jr. to just play left tackle and allows Yalta Frohl to really just play center and keep that pocket deep for Kyler Murray, we're going to be having incredibly different conversations throughout the entirety of the season next year and not just through the bye week. So while it seems like a smaller move, while it seems like it's something that, the wavering degrees of success are really just in the analytics, the offensive line, as I mentioned last week, go check out those shows because I talked about it a couple times. If the offensive line falters, stumbles from where it was this year to where it was this year, next year, that craters everything with a run-first offense. It craters everything altogether, but it really craters everything where the Cardinals can't run the ball like they want to. So when I saw another Ohio State dude coming over, it's like, all right, they're understanding where the best coaches and best players come from, which sounds crazy, and I understand. Like, you're going to have some Khalil Macks. I think Khalil Mack went to Buffalo. Like, if you're an all-world player, they're going to find you in college, okay? But by and large, the best players, especially in the NIL world now, will go first, at least, to the really good schools, and then if they don't get playing time, they'll go elsewhere. So Justin Frye in, Clayton Adams out. And I just think that with this coaching staff already getting an OC job elsewhere, that's not something that you've been grown accustomed to witnessing watching the Arizona Cardinals. It's a move in the right direction. I know it's not as fast as people want. I'm not sugarcoating this just for my health. These are good things that happen when organizations do things the right way. Justin Frye, new offensive line coach. Mock draft Monday. Dude, I did not see this coming. Matt Miller, ESPN, put out his first 2-round mock, and it's going to surprise you. Discuss it next. Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by our friends, Bink at Prize Picks. I love Prize Picks also. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. You pick more or less than at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Prize Picks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw 1 yard to win. Pair that with one more correct pick, and you're cashing out. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you place your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Today's episode of Locked On Cardinals is also brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Looking for tickets to the next big event, maybe last-minute tickets to the big game next week. Whether it's a concert, a comedy show, or a sports game, finding the right tickets at the right price can be a headache. But with Game Time Picks, it's never been easier. Let me explain how it works. With Game Time Picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. Also, you can get to a point where you can watch and scroll, click on a potential tickets that you want to buy, and it'll show you your vantage point from the seats before you buy. A full panoramic view, so you don't have to guess. Ready to make your next event even better? Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So I'm not going to do my own mock drafts for a while. It's just not. Come on. We have more content than that. But what other people think is fascinating to me, especially people a lot smarter in the space than I am, who solidify their life to drafts and scouting and things like that. And Matt Miller is one of the best. And he's got Now, I'll preface this quickly by saying that over the last couple of years, I've hammered home the idea that the Cardinals roster needs strengths. They need strengths. Every day, as you'll know that if this is your first listen to Locked On Cardinals, thank you. Maybe make tomorrow your second. The Arizona Cardinals, for a couple of years there, didn't really have a strength. They had some pretty good positions. They had some good players, but they didn't have a strength that opposing teams needed to scheme for. That was one of the things I mentioned a lot, with redundancy, but necessary redundancy. Now, and I'll do a segment on this. I'll do a show on this, I believe, this week. I'll do strengths and I'll do weaknesses for the roster. You could say there's an argument that could be made that the secondary is now the biggest strength the Arizona Cardinals have. Say the run game, say the pass catchers, because I'll always group Trey McBride. I'm not going to say, the tight end is the biggest strength. I'm not going to do that. You group tight end with wide receiver and tight end for pass catchers. That's what it is. But it could be argued that the secondary is the biggest strength that the Cardinals have after retention of Budda Baker, Adrian Taylor-Demerson showing that he's ready to rock, Garrett Williams, Max Melton. Like, you could argue that. And Matt Miller completely dropped this on his head, where he has the Cardinals taking not just one corner, but two in the first two rounds, which it's fascinating because this is what mock draft season is. Okay. I'm not saying that there's no merit to this. I'm saying that this is bending brains to understand that there are so many different possibilities, and people think, no, that's a dumb idea. This is the best idea. We have no idea what these players are going to be like at the NFL level. You got an idea. If it trends from college to this, it's going to be this, but we have no idea what's going to happen. And that's not like a dumb thing where it's like, well, you could get run off the road by a car tomorrow and die, so you got to live today like it's your last. No. That's not what this is. There's so many different ways to build a roster. And with the Cardinals roster is currently constructed, they still need cornerback help. So at 16, Matt Miller has the Cardinals taking Jahdae Barron, corner out of Texas, who is the Thorpe Award winner for the best defensive back. Okay? And what? So you get Garrett Williams, Max Melton, and Jahdae Barron. Sean Murphy-Bunting is a rotational piece. Now, the question is, do you want to use that capital on a corner with a position of strength that's already there? The way to say yes here is, well, then the Cardinals are looking at a top 5 secondary in football, which covers up some weaknesses elsewhere. So do you add talent like a defensive lineman or something at 16 and one in free agency? It's like, okay, they're better, but they're not so good to the point where they're absolutely wrecking house on opposing offensive linemen. So the defense still isn't complete and still doesn't really have a bona fide strength that other teams are like yearning for with their rosters. So say they take a corner. It's like, okay, well, not exactly where you would have gone, especially because I think they should go offensive. The best offensive lineman at 16, in my opinion. I know the defensive line's bad. Best off line at 16, best off lineman at 16, and then you go and get a pass rusher or two, or a defensive lineman pass rusher, and you draft later in the draft. Not only does Matt Miller have them taking a corner at 16, he has them taking a corner at 47 too. It's Siobhan Revel, cornerback out of East Carolina. Okay? And this guy, he tore his ACL in September. Okay? So this is a guy, a la Garrett Williams, where we're in a day and age now where tearing your ACL doesn't make you injury prone. Injury prone is when you have an ankle sprain that keeps you out 6 weeks, a high ankle sprain, which is super painful, but it's like you're always injured. Tearing an ACL, especially with modern science, it's like, 9 months and you're back. Yeah, it's an injury and it's bad. But you could tear your ACL doing anything. So it's not like they're always, hangnail out for 6 weeks. That's injury prone. But him saying them drafting 2 corners makes it seem like Max Melton is kind of an afterthought. And number 2, and this is not what I think it is, okay? But this is what we as media members, fans, this is what we've grown accustomed to here by the national media, not really paying attention to the Cardinals roster. Kind of having them as an afterthought. Or if that's the case, that would make sense that you would say 2 corners when the Cardinals really already have a CB1 and a CB2 in wait. While this is bending things a little bit too much for me, it's also something where it's like, listen, if you want to make the Cardinals a strength, if you want to make them a strength that's bona fide and feared across the league, yeah, you draft a corner at 16. Is it the best practice? I don't know. There's no such thing. It depends on what Monty Oswalt wants to do. Obviously, things are going to there's going to be a lot of light shed during free agency, trades otherwise. You would think that at this point, the Cardinals won't be drafting just for need. They'll be drafting for depth also. It's like a solar eclipse right now. Like it was just for need because they had no good players. This past year, it was kind of both depth. Trey Benson, Dadrian Taylor-Demerson, Tip Ryman, need, Marvin Harrison Jr., Darius Robinson, Max Melton. And now it's kind of going where it's like 80% of the solar eclipse is gone, where it's like you're going to get enough in free agency, you would think. That's the plan, where you could truly draft for depth in the draft. And that would validate taking 2 corners. I just don't know in the first and second round the best allocation of draft capital, but it's so early. We have no idea, but it's a fascinating approach. And Matt Miller is one of the smartest in the game. So I do not take his thought process with a great of salt. Alex Clancy, Locked on Cardinals. Remember, without you, there is no me. Strengths, weaknesses. Next 2 shows. Check it out. I'll talk to you tomorrow.